Are we rolling? Yes, we are. What's up, guys? It's your boy McKinley Crain here, and today I'm going to be doing my spoiler-free movie review of a movie that is, in my opinion, one of the greatest movies of all time. And that movie is Back to the Future. So, for those of you who don't know, and if you like movies, how the hell do you not know of this movie's existence? How the hell have you not seen this movie? If you don't like this movie, you are dead inside. Okay, no, actually, no offense if you don't like this movie, no offense, and I'm not attacking you or anything. You're probably a really good person. And don't hate on yourselves for not liking it. I mean, you like what you like, and everybody's different. But just know that, in my opinion, you don't know what a good movie is, because this is just one of the best movies of all time. It's in my top 10. It's my fourth favorite film of all time, and the Back to the Future trilogy is my second favorite trilogy of all time, behind the Dark Knight trilogy. This is just a phenomenal film. It's one of the most fun films of all time. It's one of the most rewatchable films of all time. I have seen this movie at least 30 times. And I've rewatched multiple parts of it, even more than that, but I've seen like the full movie, like the whole movie at least 30 times. It's probably up there, and it's probably one of the most rewatched. It's probably like one of, if not the most rewatched movie that I've rewatched in my life. There's just so much I have to say about this movie. It's fantastic. It's perfect. It's fun. It's so lovable. It's such a lovable movie with such an awesome concept. And just, I don't understand how you could actually even hate this movie. Unless you just hate movies in general, like, you just don't like movies, you don't like the whole idea of a film, you just don't like movies at all. Other than that, how could you hate this movie? Or maybe you just don't like time travel movies at all. But even if you don't like time travel movies at all, how could you not like this movie? This movie is one of the best movies of all time. It's one of my favorite movies. It's not my number one favorite movie, it's my fourth favorite movie. But it is in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Anyway, now let's get on to the story. So, everyone should know, everybody who knows of this movie already knows this, probably. But this movie stars, Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly. Who's like a 17-year-old boy, so he's my age, because I'm 17. And, well, actually, this movie takes place back in 1985, so and it's 2021 right now, so he's technically, like, if you want to see it that way, older, but, like, he's 17 in this movie, even though this movie does not take place in 2021, obviously. So yeah, he's my age. And he's a very lovable character. He's one of the most lovable characters of all time. And in my opinion, and in my experience, he's one of the most relatable movie characters of all time. Um, he's just an awesome movie character, and he's so three-dimensional, and he's so lovable. It's like, I don't know how Michael J. Fox did it, but he did it. He pulled it off. Like, he hadn't been in a lot of, like, big stuff before this. I mean, he was in Family Ties, and no, I think he was in Teen Wolf after this movie came out. But he was an actor already, but he wasn't, like, regarded as, like, he wasn't like an Al Pacino or a Robert De Niro, if you know what I mean, like, regarded as one of those A-list actors or whatever. In my knowledge, I mean, he might have, but I'm not really familiar with, like, everything he did before this movie. But yeah, that's just what I know so far. And all the characters in this movie are so lovable and so awesome and so perfectly cast, but everybody knows that Marty McFly was the most perfectly cast. I mean, yeah, Marty McFly was the most perfectly cast. Michael J. Fox was perfectly cast as Marty McFly. Marty McFly has hopes and dreams. Like, I'm just describing his personality. He has hopes and dreams, and he's not really afraid to say what he needs to say. He's that kind of person. He's not a pushover. Yeah, that describes him perfectly. He's no pushover. He's the exact opposite of a pushover. If somebody's doing something he doesn't like, and, it's harming somebody else or it's harming him, he'll give them a piece of his mind. And except if one of those people is his mother. If his mother, Lorraine McFly, well, like, the beginning of the movie, 1985, Lorraine McFly, like, is the only person that Marty McFly doesn't have the guts to just, like, say what he really feels like around to her, or like around her, because he's scared of her, and he knows that, like, he knows that she's his mother, so, like, she's not, like, abusive or anything, but she's like a drunk loser mom who's, like, kind of a femcel, and doesn't like Marty's girlfriend, and doesn't like Marty's friends, and doesn't like the kind of stuff that Marty does in general, even though she doesn't know that he's doing a lot of those things. Like, she doesn't like the idea of children dating, any children of any age dating. So yeah, Marty has to keep that a secret. And, she's just a really bitter person. And, just somebody you wouldn't want as your mother. Not abusive at all. But, like, just a loser mom who's, like, bitter and annoying and is pretty, like, overly strict. But the thing is, she's also pretty stupid. So she's, like, stupid enough to, like, fall for, like, the crap that Marty's doing, like, outside of their house and stuff. And she's also, like, pretty ignorant, so yeah. And then, if we're talking about the parents, Marty's dad, like, at the beginning of this movie, like, the beginning of the movie, 1985, Marty's dad is, his name is George McFly, and, he's the complete opposite of Marty, and this movie acknowledges that. George McFly, like, beginning of the movie 1985, George McFly is a total pushover. You know, even if he knows for a fact that he's getting the muddy end of the stick, or somebody's doing him dirty and just being unfair and cruel to him, he's a pushover. He's like, he'll just let it happen. And, you know, that's, of course, Morty has a problem with that, and this movie acknowledges that very well. It's very aware of that. And I love how we learn about, like, you know, the parents' personalities before Marty McFly goes back in time and meets, like, you know, the high school version of his parents when they were like high schoolers, the 1955 version of his parents, because, like, you know, it just makes, like, observing their personalities when they were that age so much more interesting, like, because you can kind of, like, compare and say, hey, this is why this is probably, like, why that happened, and, like, oh, it's shocking that this person wasn't like they are now. What happened? It's just part of what makes the movie work. So, on with the story. So Marty McFly is friends with Dr. Emmett Brown, aka Doc Brown, aka Doc, played by Christopher Lloyd. And Doc McBrown is what many would consider to be a mad scientist. He's not evil at all. He's actually a very moral and ethical human being. But he does a lot of crazy experiments, like that a whole bunch of people would, like, say, that's weird. Why would you do that? That's never gonna work. Why would anybody ever think that would be successful? And for the most part, they're right. He doesn't, like, most of his inventions suck and were useless and didn't work. But we know that he had one successful invention, which was a time machine that he made out of a DeLorean car. And he basically has Marty videotape, like, record him, like, actually testing it out and using it. And, you know, then let's just say, I can't get into too much detail what went wrong in the situation, but something went wrong in the situation, where Marty ended up having to get into the DeLorean car to drive away from something that I can't mention because of spoilers. And he ends up going back in time to the year 1955, and he doesn't know how to get back. The DeLorean's out of fuel, and he ends up running into his parents, and, like, well, the 1955 version of his parents, and seeing, like, what their personalities were like, and he goes to, you know, the 1955 version of Doc Brown, and it's just like, hey, you gotta help me get back to the future. And first Doc Brown doesn't believe him, but when Marty actually proves, yes, I'm from the future, Doc Brown's like, okay, yeah, I'll help you get back to the future. And while they're, like, planning how to get back to the future, Doc Brown kind of, like, you know, figures out, wait a minute, since he's in the past, he could do and he's from the future, he could screw up something, and he could, like, mess up the timeline. And then he's like, hey, Marty, did you talk to anybody? Like, did you, like, by the way, you can't talk to anybody. You have to stay here the whole time because you could just disrupt the space-time continuum. And then Marty's just like, I ran into my parents. And then, like, Doc Brown's just like, oh damn, like, that's bad. That, like, that could, like, severely alter, like, you know, the timeline and make it where you were never born. And sure enough, they discover, yeah, that's actually a problem, because Marty, for some reason, like, kind of prevented his mother from meeting his father, and kind of took the place of where the father was. Like, his father was supposed to be the place where Marty ended up being. So then, like, you know, Lorraine McFly ends. Well, her last name wasn't McFly then, but, like, you know, Lorraine ends up liking Marty instead of George, and that's creating a problem. And if, like, you know, if the two parents don't meet within, like, you know, a certain amount of time, Marty's not gonna exist. Like, you know, he's gonna completely fade away. So that creates, like, a whole nother problem for Marty, and Marty's just like, oh, gotta solve that. So Marty's like trying to balance, you know, getting back to the future, finding a way to get back to the future, while also finding a way to make his parents still fall in love. And whether or not he does, I can't spoil that for you. But it's a wild ride, and it's a perfect ride, and a fun ride, and an awesome ride, and of a movie, and I love it. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's my 4th favorite movie of all time. I know I've already said that like 6 times before in this video, but I have to keep saying it because I really do mean it. It's very fun. It's very lovable. It's very watchable. It's very thrilling and gripping and fun, and the humor that's in here is just terrific and perfect and very cleverly written, and is just very witty humor and smart humor. And this movie has awesome writing. It's just an awesome movie. It's an epic movie. It's one of the most epic movies ever, in my opinion. It's very memorable. How could you forget this movie? How could you forget? I can understand how you could forget certain, like, details about this movie, but how could you just forget that this movie exists? How? How could you? Unless you got amnesia or something, but in that case, I guess you have an excuse. Like, this movie is just so good and so fun. It's one of the most fun movies ever. I don't actually know what genre to put this one in, to categorize this movie as, because it's like there's a lot of comedy, but then there's like some action, and then there's like some drama. I know for a fact it's not a horror movie, but if I was guessing, I would probably put this in, like, this is probably technically a comedy movie. I guess it is, but, like, you know, it fuses a lot of the movie genres, and it works very well, and it's perfect. And this movie is very quotable. Like, when you hear somebody go, "Great Scott," that's someone who's probably seen the movie, or at least known of Dr. Emmett Brown saying that in the movie. Like, nobody who's unfamiliar with that movie is going to go around saying "Great Scott" unless there's somebody who just doesn't know about the movie and hears other people going "Great Scott." So they're just like, oh, I guess if other people are saying it, it's a cool thing to say. Otherwise, uh, like you have no excuse. Um, this movie is just iconic, and every single scene from this movie is just epic and like awesome and memorable and perfect and fun, and just this movie is gripping. Like, you want to know what happens. You want to like you want to know what happens to Martin McFly because you love Martin McFly. He's a very lovable character. This movie is not only good in quality, like perfect in quality, but it also, like, influenced modern movies today, how and future, and like, a lot of movies after that. This was a very influential movie. Um, it changed. It changed a lot of the. It changed the way people saw movies in general. I mean, there was like, it kind of like it kind of like revolutionized the main character of a movie being a teenager, like a teenage main character in a in movies, because like, I know that, like, there was American Graffiti before that, and then there were like a whole bunch of other teenage, like, movies with teenagers as the main character, but I feel like this one was the most influential, and this is without a doubt the best time travel movie of all time. um and it's just awesome, and I love this movie, and not only do I just love, like, love the way it's done, just love the characters and everything, just find it very watchable. Like, I also just really dig the whole, like, Back to the Future lore, like, world. I love just looking up people's theories about, like, this movie and this Back to the Future sequels, which are also some of my favorite movies of all time. But my favorite Back to the Future movie is definitely this one, definitely the original. I just love hearing people, like, share their theories about this movie and the other Back to the Future movies, and just share their thoughts about it. And this movie, like, this movie just did so many things right, even things that, like, people normally had problems with. This movie, like, took those things and made them good, made what would usually piss an audience off, and just made, like, just flipped the whole situation scenario on like, on its head. Like, it made those things lovable. Like, the audience loved those things in this movie because they were done so well. What I'm referring to is product placement. The product placement in this movie, and there is a lot of it, is not hated at all. And yes, product placement in movies is a widely hated thing. I don't hate it at all. Um, but I know that a lot of people do. But nobody hates the product placement in this movie, because the product placement in this movie is so, like, cleverly done. Because, a big part of this movie is pop culture. It's like, this movie, like, in this movie, like, there's, like, this whole thing where, like, Marty McFly is, like, comparing, like, all the pop culture stuff from, and all, like, the modern gadgets and stuff from his, not modern gadgets, but modded for him, from his time, from his, like, year 1985, and, like, comparing them to, like, 1955, like, and it works. It works very well, and it makes this movie even better. And if there wasn't, like, that whole, like, all those pop culture references in there, like, all that pop culture stuff in this movie probably wouldn't be as good as it was. Well, it probably wouldn't have been as good as it was. But, you know, those things were still included in. And so it is as perfect as it ended up being. And I will forever love this movie. And I don't see how anybody could hate it, really, except if you hate, like I said, movies in general and time travel movies. Or if you just have like a personal vendetta against Michael J. Fox or something like that, which I don't see why. He seems like a good guy in real life. I love this movie. It's just so perfect and so smart and so quotable. Like, and, you know, it's kind of educational if you think about it. Because, you know, it'll like, you know, teach, you know, like, people who didn't live in the 80s and were you know, are like kind of already unfamiliar with, you know, all these 80s things, more about 80s pop culture. Like, I don't know about you, but I didn't know that there was a thing as Pepsi free until I saw Back to the Future when I was 12 years old. Well, nearly 13, but I was still 12. I was unaware of its existence. Like, I knew that there was caffeine-free Pepsi, but I was unaware of Pepsi-free ever being a thing. I knew a lot about the 80s, but I didn't know as much about the 80s and the 50s as I did after I saw Back to the Future for the first time. I mean, most people who like movies have probably already seen this movie, so, like, you could say that's not really a relevant thing to say, because most people have already seen that movie, but for those who haven't, yeah, that is relevant. Anyway, sorry guys, I had to pause the video because, you know, I had to go do something, but I'm back now. And, by the way, yes, I'm aware that I need to use some chapstick. I'm aware of how chapped my lips are. I'm gonna use some chapstick later, guys, don't worry. Just don't want anybody in the comments to just be like, this guy has really chapped lips. And, yes, there are people that will probably say that if this video gets enough views. Anyway, I'm going to give this movie a 100% out of a 100%, which is the equivalent of an A+. I can say that this is a perfect movie without any hesitation. And if you haven't seen this movie, what's wrong with you? Go watch it. Go watch it. Go watch it. Like, stop everything you're doing right now, unless it's, like, really important. Like, if it's work stuff, or if you're dying or something, you don't have to stop and go watch it right now. But if it really is that important, why are you watching this video right now instead of dealing with whatever the heck it is that you need to deal with? So yeah, anyway, if you are watching this video, then it probably means that yes, you can, like, you know, stop everything you're doing right now and go watch that movie. Anyway, like, subscribe, join the notification squad, I will return. Oh, and yes, I have seen both of the sequels to Back to the Future, just in case you're wondering.